had gotten so dark and deep down this rabbit hole with this man that had drugged me down to the pits of hell is what it felt like.
When I hear your story and I hear how your life went and all these experiences, that God has created you not to fit in so you could be a voice. That's what prophets do. Welcome to the Rethreading Lives podcast, where we talk about how to take your threads of harm and through the rethreaded process, transform them into something that actually helps you reach your potential. We'll talk with different leaders in our city and our country and find out what they're doing. You'll walk away from listening to this podcast with useful insights and captivating stories on how you yourself can rethread your life and your business. I'm Kristin Keen, and this is the Rethreading Lives podcast. Welcome to today's podcast on Rethreading Lives, where we talk about how we take the hard things in our life, the challenging things in our life, and rethread that into something that actually helps us reach our potential. Our guest today is Megan Hayward, who's the founder and CEO of TAG, and I will let her tell you all that means. But I met Megan at a Chamber of Commerce in Jacksonville event, a trustee event. So the trustee level is like a level up. That means we pay a little bit more money. And hopefully we get to meet other executives in business. And I was across the room and there was Megan, and she was in really tall high heels, and Megan's really tall and she has like this presence about her. She was making everyone laugh. And I want to know the deeply good progressive leaders in our city, because those are the ones that actually bring change. And I saw you from across the room and I was like, she's a deeply good progressive leader and I want to know her. And I have not been disappointed. So I can't wait for you to hear Megan's story today and her trials, but also how her successes and how she overcame it and all that she's doing. She is a progressive leader. She's doing something that no one else is doing yet in the business world. So this is going to be a great conversation. So Megan, why don't you start us off a little bit with what does your life look like now?
All right. So like she said, I'm the founder and CEO of TAG, Temporary Assistance Guru. It is a staffing ecosystem is what I call it. It's a software platform that allows companies that need temps in high volume to have access to temps anywhere in the country.
Temps. Okay.
Yep, temporary employees. So they do, we literally take care of everything from A to Z. So as soon as you need employees, you're able to get them, and all the way through invoicing, timesheets, everything, we manage all of it. So yeah, I call it a staffing ecosystem, and nothing like it exists right now. And my entire background had been temp staffing, so I had actually started a temp staffing company at the age of 24,
which is so cool,
and was profitable within 6 months. Did blue collar staffing, so construction, venue management, things like that, out in Denver, and sold it a few years ago, and came up with this crazy idea to start a software to answer all the issues I had when I had a staffing company. And what I always say is no one told me I was crazy at any point along this journey. At 24, starting my first company, I didn't have anybody say, "Oh, you're crazy. Why are you doing that?" And so I went ahead and did it, and have kept going ever since. In the meantime, my husband and I are part of the ownership for the Jacksonville Icemen, the ECHL hockey team, the Savannah Ghost Pirates, the Allen Americans, and the Community First Igloo, the ice rink here in town.
Sorry. I love the Icemen. I just, through one of our very dear sponsors, they, sometimes I'll get ice side seats, and now I'm obsessed with it. It's so fun.
It is.
And then my friend from high school is actually the assistant coach now.
Really?
Yes.
Small world.
It is. I just had dinner with them last week.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How did that come about, by the way?
So the majority owner is Andy Kaufman, and he's our neighbor.
And he's your neighbor.
He lives like 3 houses down from us. And when he was thinking about buying the team, he wanted to do friends and family and just make it be a fun investment. He's like, I think we could do something with this. I think it'd be a good time. And me and my husband said, let's try it. Like, might as well. And so my husband's a retired Jaguar. And so sports kind of runs in the family. I play college basketball. And so ownership never really crossed into our minds until it did. And then we've loved every second of it since.
So the Icemen, the Savannah
Ghost Pirates.
So that's another, these are all, I'm asking ignorant questions.
No,
That's
all hockey.
All hockey team at the same level as the Icemen.
Yep. And then the
Okay.
Allen Americans are another hockey team.
Where are they at?
Allen, Texas is right outside of Dallas.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
my brother used to live in Allen, Texas.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Small
Yeah.
world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been fun. I've learned a lot about hockey, and I didn't know anything about it prior.
It's fascinating. I'm not going to ask you any questions because I really like hockey too, but I've never played it. So when I watched it, it was hard for me to have context sometimes because I didn't understand what was going on because I never played.
Yeah, and they
all
make it
other
look so
sports.
easy
Yes.
that you just assume that everybody can skate backwards really
Yes.
fast.
But it is. I hate violence, but I kind of love being on ice side and kind of witnessing a little bit of violence.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, violent sports are kind of our thing in our family, I guess. With
that's true.
basketball, football, hockey.
Maybe we should say aggressive sports.
There we go. Aggressive sports.
Aggressive sports.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I found out you were an athlete, I was like, duh. That makes so much sense.
I just carry myself. I have like a
Yes.
stroll when I walk. I'm very slow.
And there's chill, there's confidence. And I will always hire an athlete though, because you understand what it's like to work hard. You have discipline. You've done really hard things, teamwork. I mean, all of it.
Yeah. I think athletes are some of the most marketable people.
Yes.
Not necessarily that they are hired at a higher rate, but I do think they have higher success rates when they are hired.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a very successful businesswoman. How long have you had Tag now?
So the idea came in 2018. We launched early 2023.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So is that long of development?
Yeah, development took a while. And honestly, I'm a non-tech founder of a tech company.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had no idea what I was doing when I came up with the idea. I didn't even know where to start. Genuinely no idea. And so I just started asking questions like, A, would companies be interested in this? B, how do you start building software for a non-coder? And I still don't know how to code. I've found out, some pieces of coding, and I at least understand enough to understand the idea of what I'm doing. But I don't know. I think that the idea of getting into tech is what stops a lot of people because they're like, well, I don't know how to code. I'm not a brilliant person on the keyboard, anything like that. And so that really is a barrier to entry. And so for me, it was, well, let's find somebody else that knows how to do that. Let's figure out how to make this marketable. Let's figure out how to make it fun. And, staffing is a real, I would say, an ugly industry. Like it's not a very sexy industry at all. Especially the blue collar side. It's just people, a lot of times they make minimum wage, maybe a little bit more. They're just the grunt workers that people don't think about, but they are the reason the world still goes around, especially in America. And so it's about making that a marketable substance for companies that already use temps, but how do we make it better? How do we make it better for the employees and the staffing companies and the hiring companies? So all stakeholders really is trying to make it a better ecosystem for everybody.
And I'm just going to ask, how did you make it better? How'd you make it better for the workers? How'd you make it better?
So the workers typically know which staffing company treats employees the best. They also know which ones pay the most. And so it was really about, let's get some of those national contracts into the hands of good staffing companies. A lot of times local staffing companies don't have access to these bigger brands, and there's contracts and the temps need work. So they go to which staffing company has the jobs. And so let's take these huge contracts, these really cool jobs, and give it to the staffing companies that actually treat their employees well. Let's get it to them and let's give it to the hiring company for a good price. And let's get it to the staffing companies that are going to pay the most. And because at the end of the day, the hiring companies tend to not care how much the employees get paid as long as they show up, they're dressed well, they treated well, things like that. And so it's really about let's getting more information out there instead of this closed off system that it's been before.
So how did you find out which companies treat their employees good?
Which staffing companies?
Yeah.
Most of the times, I don't know. I know a lot of staffing companies just from being in it so long. And so it's a lot of conversations with staffing companies. And of course, nobody's perfect, but I really try to work with companies that I would want to work with if I was a hiring company or I was a temp. So that's kind of my barometer is if I enjoy speaking with them, if I see them treat the employees with respect. My father started his own staffing company after he retired from Dollywood. up in Tennessee.
Cool.
He was the HR manager up there for 20
Really?
years. Yeah. And so when he retired, he started his first staffing company, and my mom ended up taking it over after my dad passed. And the one thing that they have always done with their temps was really treating them well. They want their people to want to work there. And it's temp work a lot of times is because they don't have another choice, or there's nothing else they can do. And so how do you treat the least of these? And I think you see a lot more about people's character when those employees can't quote unquote offer them anything. And so you see a lot more about people. And so that's how I kind of, I don't know, sift through the staffing agencies now is who do I want to work with? Who do I like? Who do I like having conversations with? Who can, I walk in the office and trust that the employees are going to be paid correctly on time. There's not going to be any funny business, things like that.
Oh, this is already starting off so beautiful. You're already like, you already have my heart. Like, and it sounds like your parents like instilled something in you or modeled something for you that you were able to take and put into your own company.
Oh, they really did. My dad, like I said, he was in HR for 20 years, and growing up in East Tennessee, Sevier County, it's its own unique beast up there. And I love my people. I love where I'm from, but there is some stories, people bathing in the lazy river at Dollywood that my dad would come home and be like, people brought soap to the park so they could take a bath. And so, you hear all these stories, and I saw the way my dad handled it all with grace and laughter more than anything. And it just kind of became, but he handled it legally and he handled it ethically. And my mom, like, I don't know, there's some point in your 30s when you're raising kids, you realize you actually had great parents and they weren't the cause of any of the problems in your life. You actually caused most of them yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm going through right now with my parents. But my mom was truly a saint, and they were just ethical, godly, good people to be around. And if I can be that, that's what I want to be. I want to be the person that they say, oh, wow, I get to work with her. I get to work for her. And it's an honor and it's a privilege, and it's not like a burden that they have to carry around that I have to go to work today. If we can change the world, let's change the world. Let's make it better, and not just for the people that benefit us financially. Let's make it better for everybody involved.
So this is pointing like right to the Rethreaded purpose. I mean, Rethreaded, I'll pause here, and this is the Rethreaded process. I'll just talk about it. Is that this represents our potential. So all of us have this potential inside us. And what I've been defining potential as is the ability to hold all the hard and all the good, because you have to be able to hold both. And when you go through hard things, what happens is your sphere to hold things shrinks, and usually you're left with the hard things. So what the Rethreaded process is the 5 ingredients that allows you to expand your sphere. And those are time, which is the ability to sit with your thread, with the hard things. Time is your currency to heal. So it's the only resource we'll never get back. Purpose, which is your unique way that you bring love into the world. So I would love to talk about your purpose, because I can already kind of hear it as you're talking. Vision is the belief that things can change, and you believe it so much that you will take action towards it. Community, these are the people that love us, encourage us, and will hold hope for us when we don't have any, and also hold us accountable to be who we're created to be and not let us off the hook. And then openness, this is the willingness to be honest about your thread, and then with yourself, and then vulnerable with other people. And those 5 ingredients, if you pour into those, it will expand your potential. So even if you're not in a hard season in life, if you keep pouring into those, I think your sphere keeps expanding. So like just sitting here talking to you, you have a vision on how to use your business for something bigger than making money. And I bet you're making money and helping people. I mean, it's the vision, but then you're deeply ingrained in your purpose, right? To love people.
Yeah.
And then you're inviting people into community that believe in them, that want them to reach their potential. I mean, it's beautiful. It's so good.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. The reason why, I mean, there's many reasons why I wanted you to come on this podcast. Because then I brought you on a tour of Rethreaded, and then we sat in my office for way too long. The meeting went forever. I think both of us were late to something else. Yeah, whatever it was next, we were late. And because you shared with me like your story that probably most people from the outside would never guess of your story, that involved someone exploiting your vulnerabilities and sexually exploiting you. And then we didn't get all the way through, but kind of how you overcame that. And I think there will be a lot of people on this podcast who have been through something similar. I've sat with women who never told anyone about what they've been through. And I've actually sat with men who were exploited and they've never told anyone what they've been through. So what I'm hoping is if you're listening to this, maybe you have a family member, maybe you have friends, maybe it's yourself personally that you've been through something, and that you can take courage and hope from Megan sharing her story. So why don't you kind of paint us a picture a little bit about what your life looked like before we had some hard things happen to you?
Yeah, so shared a little bit. My dad was the HR manager for Dollywood, and so I grew up going to amusement parks all the time.
Really?
Yes, like grew up on roller coasters. We would stop by Dollywood and just grab lunch and like not ride, maybe ride one ride and then run off park. And so it was just one of those things. I was always at amusement parks. My mom still plays volleyball in the Senior Olympics. But growing up, she played volleyball, she played softball, and she is and was an NCAA referee for volleyball.
Wow. So lots of athletics in your family.
Lots of athletics. My dad, not so much, not an athlete.
You got it from your mom.
I did.
Yes, I love that even more.
I did. My dad never played sports a day in his life and married this super athletic woman who had super athletic daughters. And yeah, I grew up and I didn't want to play sports until I was in middle school because I was a little rebellious. But I was 6 foot tall in like 6th grade. So everybody assumed I played basketball and volleyball. And, but to be honest with you, I was a huge nerd. Still am. Fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, sci-fi, Star Wars. And I never quite fit in. I wasn't nerdy enough to hang out with the nerds, but I also wasn't like so much of an athlete that I could really just hang out with the athletes all day. So I was always just kind of going in between places. And I think because of that, because of I never fit in, I don't expect to in adulthood. And so I'm fine, like, if what I do doesn't make sense to everybody, because I never quite made sense to anybody growing up either. My teachers were always, they either loved me and I was their favorite student ever, or they absolutely hated me because I was just on top of everything. And if they said something the day before and then contradicted themselves the day after, I had questions. I went to a Christian school. So, if you said the Bible says this yesterday, the Bible better say it tomorrow, because if not, we're going to have some discussions about this.
I love it.
And it wasn't to be mean. It wasn't to, be disrespectful, but I grew up in a very Christian household, church Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, and then Christian school, and it was modeled for me. So I think I expected everyone, parents, teachers, counselors, everybody to behave. If they called themselves a Christian, then I expected them to behave as such.
Oh, like your parents.
Yeah. And as the godly people they surrounded themselves with. And so if you happen to say you were a Christian and I didn't see it and it didn't make sense to me, I don't know. I had no issue calling it out and saying, but you say you're a Christian. Why do you XYZ? And, as a kid, that doesn't go over well at 13, trying to call church leaders out. But I was blessed to go to a very great church, a very good school. And like I said, what I heard at home, I heard at school. What I heard at school, I heard at church. And so I didn't have any contradictions of doctrine at any point in my life. Went to public high school, kept playing basketball, started playing volleyball, did the pentathlon and track.
Really? Like what is that?
Five
throwing
events.
thing?
No, so it's the, let's see, shot put, high jump, long jump 100-meter hurdles and 800-meter, I believe.
Hey, no big deal.
Yeah. So, and then got a offer to play college basketball. And
Was that your favorite, like of all those you were doing?
It was,
Okay.
and I was not as good at it as I was the other sports.
Really?
Yeah, volleyball came very natural to me. Track, for the most part, did. Basketball, I had to work twice as hard to be half as good.
Mm-hmm.
But I made that my goal to play college basketball. I was going to do it, and I didn't let anything stop me. So what I always say, well, I've told a few people this anyway. My high school, when I transferred to public high school, had the KKK in it.
Wow.
So had people that I went to school with in the KKK, but my travel basketball team I was the only white girl on the travel basketball team. So I ended up with a couple people that were in some gangs on my travel team while I was going to high school with KKK members. And it was this interesting juxtaposition of race and identity in the early 2000s that makes no sense. And I think it is why I'm able to be as open and around as many people as I am now, because of that very odd mix growing up that most people don't ever get to experience. Yeah. It was definitely interesting. And when you grow up in it, you think everybody grows up the same way as you. And so I learned how to make moonshine in high school chemistry and thought that was part of national curriculum until I got to college and realized I was the only one that knew how to make moonshine out of potatoes. So yeah. It was very, very interesting childhood growing up, but I always was very confident in what I believed. And
as far as your faith?
As far as my faith.
In yourself?
Yes. And I had faith that if nothing else, I could figure it out. Like, I'm going to come across stuff that's hard, but God equipped me with enough to be able to look it up and figure out a solution. And that was kind of my internal belief in myself, even when I didn't have a clue what I was going to do with my life or what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I would call my mom crying, I don't know what my mom was like, you'll figure it out. And that was the whole conversation. You'll figure it out. And yeah, I do figure it out now. Now when I call her, I'm like, Mom, I figured it out. So she doesn't even have to counsel me that way anymore. But yeah, it was.
So do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister. She's a pharmacist out in California now, and she actually played college volleyball. And her husband coaches college volleyball at University of California, Santa Barbara.
Cool.
So yeah, volleyball family. And she's incredible, brilliant, great human. And yeah, she lives out in Santa Barbara, so I hate that she lives so far away, but
I know, literally almost as far away as you can get in America.
Yeah, from Florida to California, it's quite the distance, but we still have a good relationship and talk all the time. Yeah. But that was it, just my sister. And very close to my parents. My dad passed 6 years ago now. Just the anniversary of his death just passed. He actually passed on his birthday. So the one thing we say is actually a good thing it was on his birthday, because that's the one day a year you hear from everybody that loves you. And so it was, at first it was like, that's an awful day to pass. But then he had heard from every single person that cared about him that day. And so I'm like, if there's a day you have to go, I guess that's
on your birthday.
Yeah. And after your birthday's over, that's a good time to pass. Yeah. So, but had him, he actually got to walk me and my sister down the aisle before he passed. So
awesome.
Yeah. God's good in that way.
Did he get to meet grandbabies?
He did. So my son is the only grandbaby. My husband has 4 kids, so I have 4 stepkids and then my son, and that's it. So my dad got to meet all of them. Everybody, that's it. And no more coming from our direction anyway.
Gotcha. Done.
Yeah, 5 is enough. We're good over here. Yeah. So after college, what we had talked about before, heading into college, met a guy, and I was 18, I was a virgin, had never ventured outside of basketball in school much. Met a guy, and a very attractive guy, and started hanging out with him a few times. And after a few weeks, um, we ended up having sex. It was non-consensual, but he recorded it and said that if I don't continue to see him, he will show that to my father. And um, so kept seeing him. So it happened again, of course. And he kept having things to hold over my head. He would kill me. He would kill my dad. He would kill my sister. He would show the videos that he had been making randomly of him raping me. And so at 18, I didn't know enough to know that if he showed the videos, it was completely illegal. And so I kept seeing him, thinking I was protecting my family, think I was protecting, whomever from having to see the video, or protecting them physically from him actually killing them. And after about 5 months of this, I found out I was pregnant. Now, the whole time I was still playing college basketball. I was a freshman in college.
So what happened at this moment? Who noticed? I mean, were you functional? I mean,
I was semi-functional, but I was a freshman in college, so most of my teammates didn't know me.
You. And your family wasn't with you.
Yeah, I had just moved away. It turns out I found out later that the gentleman, the guy, had stalked me through high school, my senior year of high school, and while I was 17, and waited until I turned 18 to reach out to me. And so he knew a lot more heading into meeting me than I obviously knew about him or his past. And it kind of all came to a head one day. I don't even remember what happened, but he basically punched me and kidnapped me in front of my teammates. My teammates called the police. My parents ended up trying to drive to Chattanooga, where I was at the time. And we were in the car. There was a gun involved. He was driving down the interstate, 90 something miles an hour. Police are calling my phone, calling his phone. My parents are calling us. And I don't know how I made it out of that unscathed, but that was the first, I was able to get him for assault at that point. And then my parents, tried to ban me from seeing him anymore, but I hadn't bothered to tell them at this point that I had been raped, that he was physically abusive. I didn't know how to broach that, so I kind of just held it in. And again, I thought I was protecting them, and I thought I was protecting other people. And so just held that very close to the chest. Even when I got back to the apartment, the police were there. They're asking me what's going on. I thought that if I did tell them what really happened, that he would follow through on his promise, because I knew he had guns that weren't registered, things like that. About 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And again, freshman in college, playing college basketball. At this point, I'm like, my life's over. Like that's it. You've ruined my, this has ruined my life, ruined my future. And so I didn't care what he did to me at that point. He had still been sneaking in my apartment and kind of following me around campus and things like that. And so I wasn't able to successfully get away from him before that. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I kind of threw it all to the wind. And I was like, you've ruined my life already. Do your worst. You've already taken it all. You took my virginity, you took my innocence, you've taken my future, you've taken my scholarship at this point. I thought, so do whatever you're going to do. Kill me, kill my dad, kill whoever you're going to kill. Do whatever you're going to do. I don't care anymore. And that was at the time, I thought my life was over. But when I found out later, I realized that was God actually giving me a way out. Because other than that, I don't think I would have been able to, I would have kept protecting people. And finding that out, it was like my God watching over me and saying, hey, I'm going to give you a way to get out of this situation. And it took me years to recognize it as a blessing. But when I look back on it, this has been almost 16 years ago. There were so many times God had his hand over me and I didn't see it that way. But even in the midst of all of the craziness, and my subconscious, of course, keeps track of everything. But I want to say I was raped 96 times, from July to December when I found out I was pregnant. And, when you look back on, you can say God was there through that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's talking about how good of a God we serve, and it's not black and white with him. He can see the way through the chaos and still cover us with his love, even when it feels like we don't feel it at that time, But I ended up, like I said, I was pregnant, and I never thought about having an abortion. It didn't even cross my mind, and it's not because I'm some amazing person. I think it was a blessing it didn't cross my mind, because I can't promise you, even growing up as Christian as I did, that it wouldn't have happened. I'm the exception that everybody talks about, for abortion. And, I decided to keep him, and I was going to put him up for adoption, and actually did put him up for adoption, but the guy came back and tried to get custody during that adoption process. So it ended up being a 2-year custody battle over my son. And after 2 years, I won. He's not allowed to see my son at all, and I don't have to deal with him at any level. My son's never met him, and my son will be 16 later this year. But what an amazing God I serve to come out of this. And you couldn't have told me this 15 years ago, 16 years ago, that this was a blessing or this would have turned out well.
At that point, what did 15 or 16 years ago, you're pregnant, you had a baby. When did your parents find out everything?
The day after I found out I was pregnant, the guy texted my parents and told them I was pregnant. Yeah. Thinking that I don't exactly know what he was thinking, but he wanted me to marry him because he said, you're a Christian, and if you get pregnant, you have to marry me. And people like that, I found out later he got me pregnant on purpose. Like, he tried actively to get me pregnant because he thought I would marry him if he did. And I was like, I don't care what you think. Me being pregnant doesn't make me want to be with you. It makes me want to get away from you as fast as possible. So he tried to use, I guess, my religion against me. And it ended up backfiring. So but 15, 16 years ago, my parents were appalled because that's the day they found out everything. And they had known that he had kidnapped me that one time, but they didn't know anything else. And so I kind of came clean. I don't know what the verbiage is.
No, that was when, if we're looking at through the Rethreaded process, that's when you were open and made yourself vulnerable.
Yeah. And told him absolutely everything. And
which must have taken so much courage.
Well, it was interesting. My parents dealt with it different ways, right? My dad was, I'm going to be a grandfather. That's what he took away from the conversation, and was actually happy about that part of it. And my mom was appalled and angry. And, what we kept coming back to is I wasn't raised to be a statistic. I had caring parents, 2-parent home, grew up in a Christian family. Like, nothing, no part of my past up until that point said, oh, something, she's going to be a statistic. And so my mom kept saying, where did I go wrong? What did I do? And as a parent now, I understand anything your kids do, you feel like, oh, I screwed you up. Or, what part of me screwed you up?
Blame and shame.
Yeah. And later on in life, I've talked to me and my mom talk all the time. And one thing I've always said is there is no manual for what happens when your daughter gets raped and gets pregnant. Like, there's no manual they hand parents. And they're like, oh, well, here's the step-by-step process. If you follow these 8 steps, you'll be, a happy grandparent in a few months. And it's a tough situation. And I think that there was a lot of, like you said, shame and on all sides of this, and a lot of guilt. And then there's a kid being born into all that. And and I'm still trying to play college basketball. Like, I kept playing and
going to college.
Yes,
like
and going to college.
Yeah.
Yep. And kept getting my degree. And had my parents not been my parents, I wouldn't have been able to do that because with the custody battle and things like that, like there's no way I would have been able to handle any parts of this without my parents being so involved and as amazing as they were. And so I know I'm blessed in that way too. But I ended up transferring and got my bachelor's.
Like transferring back closer to home with your family?
No, transferred farther away.
Oh my goodness.
The guy kept stalking me for years after this. And so I transferred once, transferred twice, transferred 3 times, and ended up at UNF in Jacksonville. And that's how I ended up down here. Yeah. They saw me play at a different school. It was a junior college I had transferred to be able to transfer to a 4-year. And they saw me play and they loved it. And I always wanted to move to Florida. And it was the school that was the furthest away from him. And it happened to have a beach. So this was a win-win situation for me.
And was your kid with you this whole time? What is your child's name?
Israel.
If you want to say it out loud.
His name is Israel.
So, and he was with you this whole time when you were going to different schools, or were your parents?
No, my parents actually adopted him.
Okay.
After the custody battle ended and just for health insurance reasons and everything. And so, but I saw him all the time. So I would go home any break. They came to see all my games. And then after college, when I graduated, he moved in with me. I adopted him back. And then
so beautiful.
After I got married, my husband adopted him. So he is like the most adopted child in history. Seriously.
That's amazing, actually.
With a potential adoption that got canceled because of the custody battle. So it's like, it's just people fighting for this kid all over the place.
Whoa.
Yeah. But I tell him now, like, it's not a normal upbringing, but this means how many people cared about you and wanted you in their life. Like, it's not a bad thing. This is all a good thing.
Did you name him on purpose? It sounds like it has a purposeful name.
So my cousins were originally going to adopt him and they chose his name and I thought it was perfect because, Jacob going through the battle with God, coming out, being renamed Israel, and obviously God's chosen. I was like, something has to come from this. Like, there is a reason for all of this. Something special is going to come from this. And I always tell Israel, like, God picked you for a reason. You're a special kid, and God has a purpose for your life. Because there's no way you come from this and just have a meager existence. And, he's a powerful leader. And even when he doesn't recognize it, he's a leader. Even if he's leading the kids to anarchy, he leads them all over the place.
Y'all, I think I could use a little bit of a break. So thank you so much for listening this far in the podcast. I hope that you are learning lots. And if you're like me and you like to take a deeper dive into things, or you're visual, where I have to have something visual to understand it, we have a free download of the Rethreaded Process for you. So if you just go to our website, www.rethreaded.com, and look for the podcast page, you can get a free download that is a deeper dive into the Rethreaded Process. Because we want you to get the most value out of this podcast. And I just know that if you print this and have it in front of you, you will be able to better apply the Rethreaded Process into your life. So thank you so much for listening and keep up the hard work, y'all. So this is amazing. So you have been able to impart in your child, who was born out of probably, I'm assuming, the hardest thing you've ever been through.
Yes.
You've been able to instill purpose in him, and you had a vision that was different than what happened to you.
Yes.
Like, how did you have this pain? And then what was the process for you then to get a vision? Like, oh, this can be rethreaded into something good. Like, that seems like did it take time? Was it like, what was that process?
Yeah, it took a lot of time. And I think at first it started from anger. When, I found out I was pregnant, like the one thing he wasn't going to take from me was basketball. I was going to finish out the season. Even if I never got to play again, that was the one thing I was going to do, finish out the season. So I did. I finished out the season 5 months pregnant. and hadn't gained any weight, so it wasn't a big deal. But I still had 3 a.m., 4 a.m. workouts because it was a community college and they don't have any rules over there, so you can practice whenever they felt like it. And so I wasn't going to let him take that. And then it was, I'm going to get my degree. You're not going to steal that part of me too. And so whatever I needed to do to get my degree, that was going to happen. And eventually it became a beautiful story that I didn't write. I feel like I was just privy to be a part of it. God was writing something beautiful with all of it. And whether it was using my parents or, a friend at the time, or just a good text message from somebody. At one point, I was pretty depressed going through all of this. And, there's no coping mechanism that helps you with that at all. And one night I was pretty low, and I remember vividly this random person that I knew from years before text me. I was like, hey, do you want to hang out tomorrow? And it was the night I was planning, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I was pregnant, and I was like, there's no way I can get up tomorrow. This is it. Like, I'm going to do something tonight. Got that text message, a reason to get up the next day. And I look back and I see all these little pieces, like it's almost like breadcrumbs that God left for me. And these people that were random, and it wasn't that the person themselves was important. It's that the fact that they took the time to reach out, not knowing what I was going through, not knowing anything. And so I've tried to take that into now. If somebody pops in my head or I have a dream about somebody, I always reach out, just because you never know. You never know what somebody's going through. You never know what they're dealing with. And if it might just be a text message that says, hey, I'm thinking about you, in somebody's mind, that could change their day, it doesn't have to be their life. You could.
I mean,
yeah.
So what I find when I'm listening to your story, because sometimes I think that, well, most of us want to rush the healing process because it hurts.
Yeah.
And what I hear over and over again is that it is the tiniest things, like almost on like a daily basis. This tiny thing this day, this tiny thing this day, this tiny thing this day. And over time, those tiny things bring healing.
They do. And I don't think you notice when you're healed. Like the day that you're finally, it's the last day of healing. I don't think you know it. I think I don't think most people know when they're making history, right? It's not until it's over and you look back, you're like, oh wow, I did that. Like that's God did that. Somebody else did that. Like you don't realize it when you're in the middle of it. And it really is the small things. We all want the big, a sexy project, right?
Yeah.
Because they're fun and they're shiny. But the day-to-day grind of most of this is where you find yourself learning the most, growing the most, healing the most. And whether it's business, whether it's healing from something bad that happened, it's the choosing to get up some days is enough.
And to show up. We talk about that at Rethreaded all the time. Just show up.
Yes. And sometimes that's all that's required is your presence and just choosing to not let this define you. And I think that's where I found myself at that time. Just this was not going to be the end of my story. Life as I knew it was going to change. But I wasn't going to let this one thing define the rest of my life.
Oh, girl. So, I mean, part of what we talk about so much at Rethreaded is the way to stop blame and shame in your life. The way to heal is to take ownership. And I mean, we say it like to take ownership, and you are going to write the next chapter of your story, not your trauma.
Yes, absolutely.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And I think the part to remember, the part that kept me going, is there is another chapter. Like this isn't the end of the story. This is just a piece of it. And when I look back on it now,
oh my gosh, hold on right there though. You were young when you were going through this.
Yeah.
I mean, and to have the capacity to say, this is not going to define me. I can determine my next story. How did you have that?
Family and faith. Family and faith. Like I said, my dad had his own unique outlook on me being pregnant.
I was like,
I think that.
So his joy almost was like contagious to you.
Yes. I was like, how can you be happy about this? He was like, I'm getting a grandchild. And I was like, it's not a grandchild. Like, it's just, this isn't a grandchild. This is something completely different. How do you view this as a grandchild? And my mom was just like looking at him like, how do you mean you're getting a grandchild?
Your dad sounds amazing.
Yeah, he was just like, he was like happy. Like he was crying happy. Now he was upset about what happened. But I think having that really unique outlook on the situation, it changed my perspective too. And it wasn't, there was a piece where I didn't recognize myself going through this because I had gotten so dark and deep down this rabbit hole with this man that had drugged me down to the pits of hell is what it felt like. And, just stepping up out into the light of, being loved by my family, being loved by other people. Like it was a long process and I didn't recognize myself for a long time. And I don't even know that there was a day where I looked and I was like, oh, there you are. I think it's just, you look back and you're like, oh, I found myself at some point along the way and God grabbed me up by both wrists and just drug me the rest of the way out of that hole at some points. And it was, I think having a kid is what saved me because had I not, I'm pretty sure me or that man would have killed one of us would be dead. There's no way it would have ended well. And so you have that piece. And then there was also this piece where I had a responsibility, whether I asked for the responsibility or not. And I definitely didn't ask for it. And to this day, anybody will tell you, if you knew me growing up, I was like, I don't want kids. Like I did not want any kids, much less a kid in this way.
And now 5 children.
5 children later. But the level of responsibility that was there that I didn't ask for, but I needed, because I didn't have a choice to lay there in the morning and just not get out of bed. Like that wasn't an option, especially after college, right? Like playing college basketball is very, you get up, you have workouts, you have class, you have games, you have practice, you have it's very structured schedule. So then once you get out of that, you have a second to breathe. And then it's, okay, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What does my life look like that I'm choosing now? And having a kid at that point, it forces you to make some very structured decisions. Like right after I graduated, one thing I almost did was I wanted to be a WWE diva. And actually was kind of going down that path a little bit. And they're gone typically 5 days a week out of 7. And it would have been amazing. Like I would have loved it. But my boyfriend at the time, was like, you have a kid. You can't be gone 5 days a week. And I was like, oh, you're right. Like I have to make decisions that benefit us, not just me. And having people around me that held me very accountable for that, even when I didn't want the accountability, I think that's
love right there.
It is. And we had just started dating and he had no problem telling me like, you're not doing anything like that. And I think that's why I loved him. He was never enamored with me. I think we all say we want men that hold us up on a pedestal. I got a man that sits right next to me and stares at me like, are you going to make a better decision next time?
That's good.
It is.
I mean, that's,
yeah,
that's community right there.
It really is.
Because you're probably better for it. I
am. And I know that like what my husband will put up with is minuscule compared to what, I would put up with myself. So there's definitely a level of accountability there that with a kid involved, I needed people. My parents would have held me accountable too, same way. But, I was terrified getting my kid back after college and adopting him back. And I was like, how am I supposed to do this? I've been around him while I was getting my degree, but I don't know how to be a parent. I don't know how to be a mom. My mom told me like, neither did I. You figure it out one day at a time with him. And sure enough, like everything else that she's told me has come true. You figure it out. You just nose to the grindstone. And There's no, I think with kids involved, there is no off days. You can be less on, but you're going to be on because they have to eat and they have to get where they're going. And there was a definite responsibility factor that, again, I think was a part of the plan for God to get me to where I am now. I didn't have a unique, that time from like 18 to 25 where you just relax and figure your life out and all that. I didn't have that. I had to get it together and get it together quickly. And
start a business at 24 while
yes,
figuring out motherhood.
Yes. And start a business at 24.
So this is my question. I have been thinking of my own ideas of justice, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes when I think about how our women's vulnerabilities have been exploited. And like in my mind, I am like screaming, it's not fair.
Yeah.
Like it is not fair. So then you're left with trauma. You're left with this thing that you have to deal with now. Like this happened to you and now you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Whether you want to or not, whether it's fair or not, it is now yours to deal with. It's your responsibility. All the hard things you have to go through. How did you not get bitter? Because I've not been through that, but I got bitter through the hard things that happened to me.
Yeah. I think with bitterness comes a brittleness, and there are days where I feel more brittle, I would say. But overall, it really is believing that something gets better from this, and this isn't the end. And I think
Vision.
that like there has to be something at the end of this. And even if it's not in my lifetime, even if it's my son's grandkid that exist because of this, like how can I not be happy about that? How can I, if somebody down the line really changes the world, like what an incredible way to come from to change the world, It doesn't have to be this like, oh, we had a perfect family and we had money and, I decided to come up with a business plan and now people follow me and I, whatever the origin story is, I think it's a lot more useful to God when it comes from heartache. I don't think anything meaningful or long-term comes from a easy situation. And how many more lessons I can pass down or my son can pass down and the way my son's going to treat women because of what I went through, maybe that's going to prevent something else from happening to someone else. Like you just never know the actions and, what's happening to you, how it's going to affect people down the line, call it the butterfly effect or whatever you want. But I genuinely feel like something has to come from it, even if I don't see it. And there's going to be a beautiful story somewhere along the line because of this. And, you just put one foot in front of the other. Like I always say that it's not my job to know 5 steps ahead. That's God's job. It's my job to be prepared to take the next step when it shows itself. And so whatever I can do to prepare myself now for whatever that next thing is, that's what I have to be doing. That's my only job right now. And next step shows itself, take that step. And then my job is to prepare for the next one from there. And sometimes God blesses us to see 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead, but usually not. And so we're just kind of running blind and trying to prepare for whatever we're supposed to be learning right now.
But in some ways you hold both. Like you hold this faith, this vision. So I guess this is where vision and purpose interact with each other. You have this vision, like you believe that good will happen.
Yes.
Like through suffering, good will happen. So that's kind of like your vision. And you trust that enough that you will show up.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think, I think bad things happen all the time. And
All the
sometimes
time, yeah.
it seems senseless, right?
Yes.
And it just, Lord, just crap happens every day. And it's not that every little thing you're going to see a direct result of, right? Like we live in an imperfect world and we're imperfect people trying to make good decisions. But I bet if we go down the line, the guy that did everything to me, I bet something happened to him and
Yeah.
he had unhealed trauma. And that's what led him to doing all this. But had that not happened, had that, whatever trauma happened to him and whatever trauma he inflicted on me not happened, my son would not exist. And I feel like he has to exist. Like there's no world where he doesn't exist for me. And, maybe it's finding something good through something bad, but my purpose is to do whatever I'm called to do right now. And however I can use what's happened to me to do that, that's where I'm at. And I don't think that my trauma has to define me. And that's definitely not my purpose in life. But if something good can come from that, and if I can use that to help somebody else, or because of it, I learned a lesson that I can then impart on someone else, like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Nobody makes it through this thing alive. And we definitely don't make it through it unscathed. My trauma looks very different than someone else's trauma, and definitely don't want to compare traumas. Like, right, we all have our
Right.
own
We all
levels
have
of
hard things.
yeah, what we deal with, but I feel like there has to be some level of accountability, yes, for the people that do those things, right? Like there has to be accountability. But justice isn't always ours to get. And it's not fair. It's not fair. But the guy that did all this to me, because he didn't get justice with me, there's apparently 6 other children he has made with other women, through similar situations as mine. But how do you say that if I had gotten justice, these kids wouldn't live? Or that these kids aren't going to do something good too? And as awful as it is, like I serve an amazing God that can take something as horrible as this and make it something beautiful. Just like that was the Japanese art where they break the vases and then put it back together with the gold and make something beautiful out of the broken shards of our life. And it really is just getting up every day and choosing to keep going, even when you don't know what that purpose is.
Which I just feel like this is the grit and the athlete in you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're being.
Yeah.
Like you're being, like how God created you. I feel like your purpose, this sounds really strange, but there's some kind of prophet in you. Like when you were talking about like, I don't belong, it doesn't bother me that I don't belong. This prophet who is speaking good into something that most people would never be able to even call remotely good, that there's purpose in it. Like, I feel like part of your purpose on this planet is to be a prophet. The way that you see business, the way that you see your workers, like you have a prophetic heart.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I've never heard that before, but I appreciate it. I feel like we all do the best we can with the cards we're dealt.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be the athlete in me, right? Like just this, you're not going to win. Kind of love it.
When you were talking about that, you're like, it was anger that I'm going to finish college. I
Yes.
love it.
Yeah, like you're not going to take that from me. But even now, failure is refusing to get back up, right? Like that's failure. Getting knocked down is not failure. It makes you stronger. And
girl, say that again. This is so good.
Failure is not.
Y'all need to listen
to
this, okay? We're gonna pause. I feel like you just had a mic drop moment. All right, go, Megan.
Yeah, failure is not getting back. Is when you refuse to get back up. Like getting knocked down makes you stronger. And I know for a fact that had I not dealt with everything I've dealt with up to this point, that I wouldn't be resilient in business. I wouldn't be resilient in other aspects of my life. And honestly, if I hadn't had a kid, I probably wouldn't have married my husband because he had 4 kids. Like, kind of crazy person with no kids marries a man with 4 kids. And so it really is this like weird way of working out, but it's because God's protective umbrella is just hanging over you when you're with him, you know? And I really feel like where things go wrong for me is when I step outside of that protection and I make my own decisions and I say, no, I have it. That's when everything starts going wrong. Not that you can't get wet under that umbrella, but it's definitely wet for a reason under there. More like Job and less like Judas, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Me and my friend just had this big, long conversation about Job, and Job is kind of like, it's kind of like you. It's kind of like the Rethreaded Process. Like, he took responsibility for what was happening to him stuff was happening to him without cause, without him doing anything.
Yeah.
And to remain faithful in that. Oh.
Yeah. And I definitely don't necessarily resonate with Job at all. I think he was a way better man than, than I'll ever be. Way more godly person than me. Because I definitely had my moments with my shaking my fist at God moments.
Good.
Through that. And I, let him have it.
Good.
But, it's nice that he's big enough to take it and not take it out on me. He just takes my anger.
And waits time. God is timeless.
Yes, and he's so patient.
Yes.
And that is something I am not. And when I was going to get married, I had never really gone to therapy for all of it. I was like, I had just kind of gone through life.
Mm-hmm.
And then my husband asked me to marry him. And I realized at that moment, I was like, okay, I've never done therapy. I think I should probably just talk to somebody and see if there's something that I need to deal with before I hop into this marriage and then take it all out on my husband. And so found a therapist and started talking to her. And yes, there was a lot to deal with. Obviously the sexual abuse, and then you get through that and then it's like, oh wait, I was physically abused too. And she was like, do you want to deal with it? No, I think I'm good. Like, I dealt with the sexual stuff. I think I'm good on the physical. That seems fine. And she was like, no, I think you need to deal with the physical abuse too. And I was like, but that's not near as big of a deal as the sexual. And so ended up dealing with all of it. And, as well as we could at that time. And then, have gone in and out of therapy since then. But really just wanting to not take a step until I knew I was ready for that next step. And so I've kind of taken that approach. It's I guess it's cautious walking of, like I said, just being prepared to take that next step. So when my husband asked me to marry him, I was like, okay, now let me be prepared to take that. Let me deal with whatever I need to deal with to be able to go into this marriage and say, I'm ready to be your wife without trauma dumping on you and expecting you to fix it.
Megan's so good. It's so good because people don't do it. I'm saying people and myself too. We want the thing when we want it and we don't take the time to do the work. I think that's why I love our women so much, because some people look at our women and they have pity and they have feel sorry for them. And then our women are kicking ass and taking the time and doing this hard work, internal work that takes time and courage and sitting and being uncomfortable because they want to be ready for the next step. And they're doing the work that all of us should be doing, that you are doing. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it. It's like you're using your currency of time in the way that without intentionality, Jason always says that, without intentionality, you'll never go anywhere. And you are so intentional with your time. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we all have to be, right? Like we said, we all have our own hardships. We all have our own trauma. And until you deal with whatever that is, whether it's childhood, whether it's bullies, whether it's, I don't know, whatever your version is, you're not going to be able to go forward as far as you could without it. It keeps you tethered to the past in a certain way. And I'm always going to have a scar, right? Like that, I can't get rid of that, but I don't have to stay tethered to this man. I can cut that cord. And whether it's an emotional cord, physical cord, a trauma cord that I like to pull on when something gets hard, whatever it is, cutting that cord and doing it, like you said, intentionally, and making sure that I don't have to go back there. because I don't like who I was back there, and I don't like the way that I viewed the world back there. I want to continue moving forward. I don't want to go backwards. So how do we do that? And I think that as women, once something like this happens to you, once it's a sexual abuse, oh, you're always that victim. You're always, you're the person that, no, that doesn't define me. It's something that happened, just like I got an A on a test, or I got a good GPA, or I got a college basketball scholarship. Like, who that man is, that's not me. And I don't want his name attached to me for the rest of my life. I want to be separated from him, but also carry the lessons that I got from that situation. And I think that's really hard in today's society because, yes, there is so much abuse that happens and so many people get away with it, that it's really tough. But I also feel like we're in a place where people just want us to fit in certain boxes. And lately, something's been on my mind, and it's that homogeny is the biggest harmful piece of creativity. And I feel like if we all
homogeny meaning, you got to bring it down a little bit for me. Like,
I'm sorry.
Everything's the same.
Yeah, where we all think the same, or we're all in the same box.
Thank you.
I think creativity happens when we have different views and different ideas, and we're able to come together and discuss those ideas. And maybe you don't change my mind or I don't change yours, but we're at least able to discuss it.
Yeah.
And I think we have came to a place in 2024 where it is unpopular to disagree. And I think that disagreements are the best place for growth, as long as they're respectful disagreements. And so when you're dealing with trauma and when you're dealing with things that have happened in the past, one therapy doesn't fit all. Like maybe something worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And that's okay, because we're different. We're different humans. We have different things that hurt or bring us joy. And so finding those pieces for you that work, but also not being okay with sitting in it and not moving from there. Maybe today you don't move, but always with the idea that I will move forward. And like you said, if it's a breadcrumb, it's just a little bitty thing today that I'm going to do. But the only thing that's unacceptable after something happens is not growing from that. That is the only piece that is unacceptable for me.
Because blame and shame keep you in the past.
Yes.
And they keep you small.
Yeah.
And then when you accept responsibility is when you're able to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And have capacity to hold it.
Yeah. And our job isn't like, we can't control what happens to us, but our job is to grow. And I think when we fight it and try to stay the same, that's when you feel that like real uncomfortable grinding sensation.
I'm like in the middle of that now and I hate it so much. I just met with my counselor. Okay.
That's the lobster analogy, right? Like how lobsters like shed their shell, like there has to be some discomfort for them to grow. And like there's so many good analogies for that, I feel like.
I know. And the analogy she's using with me is it's a seed, and the seed has to have pressure around it for it to finally break through and grow. I mean, and it kind of goes back to what you're talking about from God. Like, so, oh my gosh, what does our counselor say? Have you found the gift in the pain yet?
I love that.
She works with our ladies sometimes, and she's like, this can be a very unpopular idea in counseling. This can be a very unpopular idea, but she works with her clients to find the gift in pain, gift in trauma. And it is powerful.
I love that.
I'm just so proud of our ladies. And like you, the kind of like a similar experience to you, like I've had ladies tell me, survivors tell me, I am glad it happened this way.
Yeah.
And I am like, what? What? I mean, and that to me, and then when they say it, it's not fake. It's like this deep peace with their life and how it is now. And they do have joy and gratitude. And yes, they have done so much hard work. And they can say it. I don't know. It's so powerful for me to witness it. And this is why I think I advocate so much to get like people's stories out.
Yeah.
Because we all get stuck, right? We get stuck in the blame and shame. We get stuck in this isn't fair. We get stuck in, I want it to be different.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with this.
And yeah, have you ever heard that saying, like, but even still life persists? Like,
no, but that is true.
And I think life persists even in bad ways too, right? Like if we're not growing in a healthy way, life continues, but it's going to continue growing in an unhealthy way. And so when you're sitting in the mud and you see that little sprout of green coming up, are you doing the work to cultivate that? Or are you digging down in the ground for, something else and something that's not going to be helpful for you? And like your ladies, they're making something of themselves, and it's in spite of what happened.
Yes.
But part of it is also because of what happened.
Ooh, Nate, write that down. That was so good. You got to say that again, Megan. Sorry. This is so good. This is my favorite podcast I think so far.
Yeah, because it's not just in spite. I wouldn't be the person I am today had it not happened. Right? And not that I'm grateful to that man at all, but I also can't say that I'd be sitting here today with you talking about anything of note had it not happened. And, we live in an imperfect world. Things are going to happen bad. And we have to be resilient, but I feel like that word is so overused. We almost have to have a bounce back, right? Like when you hit a wall, do you just splat against it and you're stuck there? Or do you bounce off of it and say, okay, what's next? That didn't work. It's a pivoting moment. You got to be able to pivot. And that's in a relationship, that's in jobs, that's with kids, right? Like there's no recipe that works for parenting.
No.
It's just, you watch 1,000 Instagram videos and get 1,000 different opinions on ways to raise your children. And you find the way that works for you. And I think it's the same thing for getting out of trauma. Like you find what works for you. You try a whole bunch of different things. The point is that you just keep trying and you find what works and you work with that, you run with that, and then you don't do the things that don't work for you.
Yes. I have so much right now. All right. We're going to have 2 more questions.
Okay.
I feel like I'm reminded why last time we talked so much because this is so
and we
good.
both missed our next meetings.
Yes. So my first question is, have you had a moment we call this a full circle moment. And it's kind of, maybe it's a pivot point where like you've had this moment and you're like, oh, and like you have the peace, you maybe a deep understanding, maybe you have the why. Like, have you had a first full circle moment where you felt it had been, not that the rethreading process ever ends, but you had felt something had been rethreaded?
Yes, I've had a few of those. The most recent one was I was actually on a call for a speaker. I'm on a panel coming up, and all the women that are on this panel are all female business owners. We're all founders, and all of us were teen pregnancies, different ways, one or another. And
it's fascinating.
Yes, and it just happened last week, and I was just like, wow. Wow, like none of us were supposed to make it this far. And so I'm always reminded, my parents told me, you weren't supposed to be a statistic. How did this happen, right? And so statistically improbable that what happened to me, but then more statistically improbable that all these women are killing it in business after all this happened. And I just thought that was such an incredible moment of what a great group to be a part of.
Yes.
Like teen pregnancies that still built something with their life. And I feel like we all have our own, sin, but pregnancy is the one that everybody points at because it's so visible. And I don't know. It was just such a cool moment for me to see women that it was like this. That's a good group to be a part of.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Do we get to hear it? Is it live or is it?
It'll be live. Yeah.
Okay. And then our listeners, if you're listening, what would you say now to a listener who is, and maybe struggling in their business, maybe they've experienced something similar, some exploitation? Like, what is your message to our audience? What do you want them to know and take away from today?
I think the only time that you give up is when you're dead. That's it. At the end of your life, that's when you're allowed to give up. Whether that's parenting, whether that's trying to rebuild a relationship with someone that you've lost, whether, whatever it is, like that's the only time you're allowed to stop is when God calls you home. Up until that point, you don't get to take a break. It's your job every day to get up and do something. And sometimes that's just throwing on some clothes and going outside.
Showing up.
Just showing up. And always show up if you say you're going to show up. Oh, one piece of advice I always have for people is if you're going to be helpful, actually help. Don't just don't say you're going to be helpful and then harm. If you're going to be helpful, actually be helpful. All
right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I loved this.
Thank you.
And I just want to, you are a prophet and you are changing the world with love. So thank you for advocating. I'm especially just so touched with how you see your temp workers and like you see their value and you advocate for them. And how I love how you're surrendered to what is.
Yeah.
And I think that when I hear your story and I hear how your life went and all these experiences, that God has created you not to fit in so you could be a voice. That's what prophets do. And I think my hunch is you can actually see way further than one step ahead of you, is that you see the big picture and you hold it and you speak to it and you let it guide you and you let it guide others. So you keep doing that in the world and we're all going to be better for it. So thank you so much for being here today. You were wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I appreciated this.
So y'all need to subscribe, like, go shop at Rethreaded, go be involved in our community, and thank you all for listening.